The story opens with a visual and emotional collision. A midnight black sedan gliding through a quiet residential street, suddenly bathed in the aggressive pulse of red and blue lights. The narrator establishes a countdown tension. In exactly 90 seconds, a man's entire career will implode because he confused authority with power. This opening creates immediate dramatic irony. The audience senses catastrophe approaching while the antagonist remains blind to it. The scene builds through contrasts. The composed silence of Judge Simone Carter versus the swagger of Officer Mark Collins stepping from his cruiser. Where the competitor's version uses affluence as the visual marker, yours uses the interplay of posture and presumption. Collins sees what he expects to see, a black woman who doesn't belong in this car, while Simone embodies what he refuses to acknowledge, legitimate authority. The introduction establishes the central question through action rather than exposition. What happens when someone who mistakes a uniform for omnipotence encounters someone who actually holds institutional power? As Collins approaches with his hand resting on his weapon and Simone sits with her hands visible on the wheel, the narrator frames this as a test, not of who will win but of how completely one man can destroy himself in a single interaction. The pacing mirrors your competitor's ticking clock, urgency but personalizes it through character-driven tension rather than just circumstance. 12 hours earlier, Simone Carter had sentenced a man to 18 years in federal prison without blinking. The courtroom had been silent except for the defendant's mother weeping in the third row. Simone had looked down from the bench, not with cruelty, but with the weight of someone who understands that justice isn't about feelings, it's about precision. The gavel fell. The man was led away. And Simone gathered her files with the same steady hands that had just altered the trajectory of a human life. That's what people didn't understand about being a federal judge. It wasn't power. It was responsibility so heavy it pressed into your bones. Now, driving home through the quiet streets of Riverside Oaks, she allowed herself to breathe. The sedan hummed beneath her, leather interior still carrying the faint scent of the dealership. A lease through Thor Legal Group, her firm's perk for taking the bench. Everything legitimate. Everything documented. She thought about the mother's face. Wondered if she'd made the right call. Knew she had but wondered anyway. The rearview mirror flashed blue and red. Simone's stomach tightened but her hands didn't. She signaled, pulled to the curb with textbook precision, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Her father's voice echoed from 30 years ago. When they stop you, baby, you make yourself small. You make yourself safe. She watched in the side mirror as the officer stepped out. Young. White. Moving with that particular swagger that signaled he wasn't approaching a traffic stop. He was approaching a victory. Simone closed her eyes for just a moment. Here we go. Mark Collins had a system. Tuesday and Thursday nights, he worked the north end of Riverside Oaks where old money met new. Big houses. Expensive cars. And just enough black and brown faces driving through to make his quota without raising flags. His training officer had taught him the trick. You don't need probable cause. You need reasonable suspicion. And brother, suspicion is whatever story you can sell. Collins was an excellent salesman. He'd pulled over 17 vehicles this month alone. 12 citations. 3 arrests. 2 civil asset forfeitures that padded the department's budget and earned him a nod from the sergeant. The pattern was simple. Target the outliers, manufacture the justification, document the narrative. Tonight's target was almost too perfect. Black woman. Luxury sedan. Driving slowly, suspiciously slowly, through a neighborhood where the median home price cleared $2 million. Collins didn't need to see her face to construct the story. Drug money. Stolen vehicle. Outstanding warrants. Something. He flipped the lights and felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This was the part he loved. The moment before contact when he held all the cards. When the person in that car went from citizen to subject. From autonomous to controlled. Collins adjusted his body cam, angle just right to capture compliance but obscure aggression, and stepped into the night. The woman's hands were already visible on the wheel. 10 and 2. Like she'd done this before. Good. The compliant ones made the best arrests because they never fought back hard enough to leave marks. Collins rapped his knuckles on the roof. License and registration. Now. Simone handed over her license with steady fingers. Registration is in the glove box, she said quietly. I'm going to reach for it now. Collins barely glanced at the ID. Yeah. Hurry up. She retrieved the registration, Thor Legal Group printed clearly across the top, and passed it through the window. Collins held it under his flashlight and for a moment, Simone watched something flicker across his face. Confusion maybe. Or recognition that this didn't fit his script. Then the mask returned. "This your car?" Collins asked. "It's a lease through my employer." "Ah. And what do you do?" Simone met his eyes. "I'm a federal judge." The words hung in the air like smoke. Collins stared at her, then at the registration, then back at her face. She watched him calculate. Watched him decide. He smiled. "Sure you are," Collins said. "And I'm the Pope. Step out of the vehicle." "Officer, I would strongly encourage you to verify." "Step." The vehicle. Simone's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed level. "On what grounds?" Collins leaned closer to the window, and Simone caught the scent of coffee and cologne. "On the grounds that I smell marijuana emanating from this vehicle, which gives me probable cause to conduct a search. Now step out or I'll remove you myself." Simone had sentenced 11 people for civil rights violations during her tenure. She knew exactly what Collins was doing. Knew exactly where this was going. And she knew that fighting him here on this dark street would only give him the violence he was hoping for. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "I'm complying under protest," Simone said clearly. "And I'm informing you that I'm a sitting federal judge in the Northern District. I'm unarmed. And you are making a catastrophic mistake." Collins pulled open her door. "Yeah. Well, Your Honor, let's see how catastrophic it gets." Collins made her stand beside the car while he searched. Simone kept her hands visible, her breathing controlled, her mind cataloging every detail. Time, approximately 10:47 p.m. Location, residential street, minimal traffic. Witnesses, none visible. Body cam, active, angle favoring the officer's narrative. She'd seen this dance before. From the bench, watching footage just like this, listening to officers testify about smells and furtive movements and reasonable suspicion. She'd upheld some searches. Thrown out others. And now she was living inside the testimony. Collins rifled through her glove box, trunk, under the seats. Finding nothing because there was nothing to find. "You got a lot of legal paperwork in here?" Collins called from inside the car. "You a lawyer or something?" "I told you. I'm a federal judge." Collins emerged holding her judicial ID, the one with the official seal, her photo, and her title printed in raised lettering. He studied it under his flashlight, and for the first time, Simone saw uncertainty cross his face. Then he laughed. "Man, this is quality work," Collins said, turning the ID over. "I mean, really? Where'd you get this made?" "Some guy on the internet." "That's a federally issued identification card." "Sure it is." Collins pocketed the ID. "You know what I think? I think you're involved in some kind of identity theft operation. Impersonating a federal official is a felony, sweetheart." The word sweetheart hit like a slap. Simone felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Clarity. This man wasn't going to stop. He'd already committed to the narrative. And the only way out now was through. "Officer Collins," Simone said, reading his nameplate, "I'm going to ask you one more time to contact your superior before this situation becomes irreversible." Collins pulled out his handcuffs. "Turn around." In that moment, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay with someone who's heading toward disaster, even when you know how it ends. The metal bit into Simone's wrists. She'd sent people to prison who'd worn these same cuffs. Had watched bailiffs escort them from her courtroom, hands bound, dignity stripped. She'd never imagined the weight of them. The way they reduced you to an object. "You're making a mistake," Simone said one final time. Collins leaned close to her ear. "No, Your Honor," he whispered, voice dripping with mockery. "You made the mistake when you decided to drive through this neighborhood pretending to be somebody you're not." He guided her toward his patrol car, not roughly enough to leave bruises, but firmly enough to assert dominance. The door closed. The partition went up. And suddenly Simone was alone in the back of a police cruiser, watching the world through plexiglass. Collins climbed into the driver's seat and picked up his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got one in custody. Female, late 30s, impersonating a federal official. Transporting to central booking." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Unit 12. Booking advised." Collins met Simone's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Comfortable back there, Judge?" Simone didn't respond. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead. The precinct. The booking process. The moment someone would run her name through the federal database. She'd built her career on patience. On letting the system work. On trusting that truth eventually would surface. Tonight she'd find out if she was right. The patrol car pulled away from the curb, leaving her midnight black sedan alone under the streetlights. Inside, Simone closed her eyes and began mentally drafting the legal documents she'd need. Not for her defense. For his prosecution. Captain Andrew Foster was 3 months from retirement. He'd survived 28 years in law enforcement by keeping his head down, his paperwork clean, and his officers in line. No scandals. No lawsuits. Just 3 more months until his pension vested and he could disappear to a fishing cabin in Montana. Then Mark Collins walked into central booking with a woman in handcuffs. Foster was passing through on his way to the parking lot when he glanced into the processing room. Saw the woman's face. And felt his entire retirement plan evaporate. Collins? Foster's voice cracked like a gunshot. Collins turned, grinning. Hey Cap, got a good one tonight. Identity theft, impersonating a federal. Get those handcuffs off her. Now. The room went silent. 3 other officers stopped mid-conversation. The desk sergeant looked up from his computer. And Collins' grin faltered. Sir? Foster moved between them, his face drained of color. Judge Carter. I'm so sorry. There's been a terrible mistake. Simone looked at Foster with the same steady gaze she used from the bench. Captain Foster. We've met. Yes, ma'am. Last year. Community Policing Forum. I remember. Simone held up her cuffed wrists. I'd like these removed, please. But after that, we need to talk. Collins was staring between them, his confidence bleeding out. Wait. She's actually? She's Federal Judge Simone Carter, Foster said through clenched teeth. She presides over the Northern District. She's overseen approximately 40 cases involving this department. And you just arrested her for driving while black. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Collins' face went white. Then red. Then white again. But, she didn't? I thought. You didn't think? Foster said. That's the problem. We can make this go away, Foster said quietly. They were in his office now, door closed, blinds drawn. Foster had offered Simone coffee, a chair, an apology so profuse it nearly sounded like begging. Collins stood in the corner, silent, his career dissolving in real time. Simone sat perfectly still, her wrists finally free but still bearing the red marks of the cuffs. We'll destroy the body cam footage, Foster continued. No arrest report. No record. Collins will be disciplined internally. Suspended probably. Maybe terminated. But this doesn't have to become public. Simone let the silence stretch. Let Foster squirm. No, she finally said. Foster blinked. I'm sorry? I said no. Simone leaned forward. I want to be booked. Fully processed. Fingerprints, photographs, the complete arrest record. Judge Carter, with all respect, that doesn't make sense. Why would you want? Because Officer Collins fabricated probable cause. He conducted an illegal search. He arrested me without justification. And right now, the only documentation of that is his body cam footage and his word. Simone's voice was calm, surgical. If you release me quietly, this becomes he said, she said. But if you book me, Officer Collins has to file a sworn report. He has to document his probable cause. He has to justify every decision. Foster's eyes widened as he understood. And when that report contradicts the evidence, Simone continued, when it contradicts the body cam, when it contradicts reality, that's not just misconduct. That's perjury. That's a federal civil rights violation. That's prosecutable. Collins made a sound like a wounded animal. You can't. Simone turned to face him. I absolutely can. You created this situation, officer. Now I'm going to make sure it's documented properly. Captain Foster, I'm ready for processing. Foster looked like he might be sick. But he nodded. Because when a federal judge asks to be arrested, you don't really have a choice. The TikTok video was posted at 11:43 p.m. User at @Nightle_Riverside had been walking his dog when he saw the traffic stop. Saw the woman's hands on the wheel. Saw the officer's aggressive posture. And he'd done what any good citizen does in 2025. He started recording. The video was 90 seconds long. Shaky footage. Dark lighting. But the audio was crystal clear. I'm a federal judge. Sure you are. And I'm the Pope. By midnight it had 50,000 views. By 1 a.m. 500,000. By dawn, it had crossed 50 million, and hashtag Judge Carter was trending worldwide. The comments section was a war zone. Outrage. Support. Conspiracy theories. But the narrative was clear. A black woman had been arrested for the crime of existing in the wrong place with the right credentials. The governor's office called the precinct at 6:47 a.m. The Department of Justice opened an investigation at 7:15 a.m. 3 news vans arrived at 8 a.m. By 9 a.m., Captain Foster's phone had received 214 calls, and Officer Mark Collins had been placed on administrative leave pending a full internal review. Simone Carter watched the news coverage from her living room, coffee in hand, still wearing the clothes from the night before. Her clerk called. "Judge, are you okay? I saw the video. Everyone's talking about it." "I'm fine, Marcus. Do you want me to cancel your docket? The media's going crazy." Simone took a sip of coffee. "No. I'll be on the bench at 10, same as always." "But, Marcus, if I don't show up, it sends a message that what happened last night broke me." "It didn't. I'll see you at Chambers." She hung up, looked at her reflection in the darkened TV screen. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be moved. 7 months later, Mark Collins sat at the defendant's table in federal district court. Not Simone's courtroom, she'd recused herself obviously, but the building where she presided, where she'd spent years interpreting the law. Now that same law was being used to dismantle the man who'd tried to break her. The charges were extensive: deprivation of rights under color of law, filing a false police report, perjury. His sworn arrest report had claimed Simone was acting suspiciously, had matched the description of a suspect, had refused to comply with lawful orders. The body cam footage told a different story. The jury had watched it 3 times. Watched Collins ignore the legitimate registration. Watched him pocket Simone's judicial ID and call it fake. Watched him fabricate probable cause out of thin air. Collins' attorney had argued mistake. Had argued good faith. Had argued that his client couldn't have known. But the prosecutor had been brutal. Ladies and gentlemen, Officer Collins didn't just make a mistake. He made a choice. He chose to see a black woman in an expensive car and assume criminality. He chose to ignore evidence. He chose to abuse his authority. And then he chose to lie about it under oath. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Collins sat motionless as the verdict was read, his face a mask of shock. His wife sobbed in the gallery. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder. And in her chambers 3 floors above, Simone Carter heard the news and allowed herself one small moment of satisfaction. Not because she enjoyed his suffering, but because the system, flawed, imperfect, agonizingly slow, had actually worked. 3 years later, Simone arrived at the courthouse at 7:30 a.m., same as always. She carried her briefcase, nodded to security, took the elevator to the 4th floor. The building hummed with the familiar rhythm of justice in motion. Lawyers preparing arguments, clerks filing motions, the machinery of law grinding forward. She was reviewing a sentencing memo when she heard the mop bucket wheels in the hallway. Simone glanced up. The janitor was methodical, efficient. He wore the standard gray uniform, moved with practiced precision, avoided eye contact with anyone passing. Just another invisible worker keeping the building clean. But Simone recognized him immediately. Mark Collins had aged. Hair graying at the temples. Shoulders slumped. The swagger completely gone. He'd served 8 months in federal prison, lost his pension, lost his home in the civil suit. This was his life now. Minimum wage. Night shifts. Cleaning the floors of the building where he'd once worn a badge. He hadn't seen her yet. Simone stood. Walked into the hallway. Collins looked up. Their eyes met. And she watched him recognize her. He froze. Mop in hand. Trapped between running and staying. Simone reached into her pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. She held it out. "You do good work," she said quietly. "The floors look excellent." Collins stared at the money. At her face. She could see him calculating, was this humiliation? Was this mockery? But Simone's expression held no cruelty. Just acknowledgement. He took the 20 with shaking hands. "Thank you, Judge Carter." She nodded and turned back toward her chambers. Because this was the difference between them. Collins had used his power to diminish people. To strip dignity. To create hierarchy through force. Simone had used hers to restore balance. Not by destroying him, the law had done that. But by treating him with the same respect she'd offer any person trying to rebuild their life from the wreckage of their mistakes. That night, driving home in her midnight black sedan, Simone thought about symmetry. About justice. About how sometimes the most powerful act isn't punishment. It's simply refusing to become what they were. The streets were quiet. The lights were green. And for the first time in 3 years she drove through Riverside Oaks without looking in the rearview mirror.